Hello and welcome to Real Talk in the Face of Danger. I am Diane Fort, and this is a podcast for the Department of Emergency Management. Now, we've been talking about all kinds of dangers and all kinds of things that happen and that we are very interested in getting more information on. Well, the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season was an active one with 21 named systems forming over the Atlantic Ocean. Barbados, of course, was impacted by one of these weather systems. We all remember Hurricane Elsa in early July, making it the first hurricane, I believe, to hit the island since Hurricane Janet back in 1955. Many of us are familiar with the Barbados Meteorological Service's alerts about any impending bad weather, but we are not really that aware of what happens behind the scenes at the Met Office. So here to give us a kind of a recap of the hurricane season and to look at the work of the BMS is Mrs. Samelka Jackman, who is a senior meteorologist. Samelka, thanks for joining us on Real Talk in the Face of Danger.
Hi, thank you for having me, Diane.
Okay, let's start by asking you through your lens as a meteorologist, how would you describe the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season?
Right, so this hurricane season was above average. So normally the climatic average, you would see about 14 named storms. So as you mentioned before, we did have 21 named storms. 3 were hurricanes and 4 were actually major hurricanes. So major hurricanes are hurricanes which are category 3 or above. This year, though, however, was not as bad as last year, 2020. 2020 was a record year, which was, again, similar to 2005. That's another year which stand out, where they had 30 named storms in both of those years.
Well, that is very active. I guess we were fortunate that it wasn't, as you said, as bad as it could have been. We're thankful for that.
Yes. What I normally like to say is that it only takes one, and we could see that from Elsa. So even though it was above normal, we just needed one storm here in Barbados, and we had Hurricane Elsa.
We did. Now, it's easy for us to sit back and we wait for the information and we fret if we don't think we've gotten the information early enough, and the way that we do here. But what process is taken, though, by the Met Office, the Barbados Meteorological Services, to forecast and to monitor the weather systems during the season?
Our operations here at the BMS is a 24/7 operations. So we're here every hour of every day of the year, continuously monitoring what is going on. We have Met assistants who keep an eye on what is actually happening in the sky. Our forecasters, they continue to look at satellite imagery, radar imagery, just to see what is actually happening present time. And then we do a 5-day forecast for Barbados. So we normally always look ahead for at least 5 days to see what's going to happen. We officially put out that 5-day forecast, but we continue to monitor that if there's a tropical wave coming off of the African coast, what we could maybe see in 10 days away, so that we could know, well, okay, maybe we could have a severe weather event next week. Let's continue to monitor this and just keep it in the back of our minds continuously.
Is this related in some way to your early warning system, which you use the impact-based forecasting?
With the early warning system, this is our way of informing the public of what impacts they could have from severe weather. So we call it is an impact-based forecasting. So it's not just what the hazard or the weather would be like. So yes, there's a hurricane coming, but you want to know how would I be affected. So if my name is John and I live in St. Thomas, how is this hurricane going to affect my house? Would I be getting flooding? Would there be severe winds? When should I start to prepare? What should I be doing? So on our website, you would see we have colors of either green, which means that there is no concern, so there's no threat for a particular hazard, which would say winds, which would be associated with a storm or hurricane, or you can have yellow to be aware. So maybe something is coming. So just be aware, listen out. You have orange when there's a watch, which would say, well, something is coming. We have high confidence that it's coming, and the impacts could be high. So you need to start preparing. You start batting down the shutters, and trimming any trees and that kind of stuff. And then red when the system is upon us and it's a warning. And then well, you need to stay indoors. Don't go outside, and that's some of the wording that we would have, which would correspond with DEM, who would also continue to give more finer details into into what person should be doing during a hazard.
I think it was earlier in the season as well, probably before Elsa, if my memory serves me correct. There was what we call the freak storm. Remember this lightning storm? Is that something that you were able to see coming, or is that the occasion when something slips through the cracks, so to speak?
That system was a result of a tropical wave. So we saw there was a tropical wave approaching the island. The way in which it developed just to the east of Barbados, where there was a vortex. You would have heard that term when we spoke about the freak storm. Mm-hmm. That part of the forecast, that would have been more, it was just happening at the time. It wasn't a case of that was something that you could see for a long period in advance. So we saw the waves, but how it intensified right off of Barbados, that was something that was just like a snap of the finger. However, because we continue to monitor, as I mentioned, when the forecasters that were working, although it was the middle of the night forecasters and assistants, they were on the job, they were up, they were monitoring the weather. So they were able to say, well, hey, something happening just the east of Barbados. Then we would have had a flood warning go out in the middle of the night. You would have had the severe thunderstorm warning go in the middle of the night, because we would have seen, yes, it would not have been 2 days in advance that you would have known, but you still were able to get that warning as soon as the forecaster would have seen something is there and it's happening in the island.
Well, I certainly think that we have to salute the work from the Met Office, as we call it loosely, with the BMS, because I know sometimes people are tough on you and feel like, oh, well, they didn't tell us, or how come I didn't see this notice? I'm sure you get oodles of calls and email messages coming in because of how people can behave. But we have to salute you on the work that you have been doing in keeping us informed, because you're not God. At the end of the day, you don't control Mother Nature, but you've been doing an amazing job. Now, we're almost at the end of the season. Is it likely that Barbados or the Caribbean, that we could be hit by, or impacted rather, by a storm outside of those months, June to November?
Yes, it is likely, but not necessarily for this season. So we actually it's coming on to the end of this season, and we are actually forecasting more drier conditions over the next few months. However, there are systems that have developed outside of the season in the Atlantic, but most of them tend to be further north of our region. We haven't seen one occurring in the Caribbean, but it is possible. And we've been seeing more and more tropical waves in May that have that potential to develop. So the possibility is that maybe in the next few years you will see a storm in May. But right now, we haven't seen anything like that here in the Caribbean.
I do remember there was some talk about perhaps starting the season earlier, so I guess that relates to that.
Yes, definitely.
Now, for us, the season ends in November. We are all looking forward to the holiday season. But what about for the team at the Meteorological Services? How are you preparing for 2022?
Right. So here we just continue to work on what's next and how to be better. We don't even really think about it as, well, the hurricane season is over. So then how we're going to now review to go for 2022. As soon as the event is over, we start thinking, well, hey, we did this. Maybe we need to try something different, so that we could always just work on improving the infrastructure we have, trying to get more automatic weather stations to get information on what's happening across Barbados. Right now, we have about 40 across the island. We're working to get to 100, and every day we just continue to pump them out to ensure that we could have a better idea of what's next and what is happening on the ground.
Well, thank you so much, Semelka. We are running out of time. Senior meteorologist with the Barbados Meteorological Services, Semelka Jackman. Just before we go, remind us how we can follow you across social media.
We have a website which will have our official forecast, which is barbadosweather.org. You can follow us. We have a Facebook page, Barbados Meteorological Services, as well as on IG or on YouTube.
Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, that was Real Talk in the Face of Danger. And be sure to follow the Department of Emergency Management also on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook.